And this last session of the day, I like to say it's a fun session. You get to meet new people. You get to learn about different movers and shakers and really pioneers in their fields. And they've took chances and risks and thought out of the box, and I'm delighted that they are all here today. So what we're going to do, I've done quick video introductions of each person. You get to see them on the big screen. Then you get to meet them in person. We will do questions from the audience, and we will adjourn on time. So with that, let's get started with this session. The first video is about Judy Sakaki. She is the very first Japanese-American woman to lead a 4-year university ever in the universe. So, roll tape on Judy Sakaki.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Sakaki.
Judy Sakaki made history this year when she was formally installed as president of Sonoma State University on April 20th. On that day, Judy became the first Japanese-American woman to lead a 4-year university in the United States. Judy was born and raised in Oakland, California. She is Sansei, third-generation Japanese-American. She is also the first in her family to graduate from college. During World War II, her grandparents and parents were interned first at Topaz, Utah, then Tule Lake, California. Her grandfather's leather suitcase, internment papers, her father's homemade record player are on display at the Sonoma State University Library. Also on display is a tiny doll Judy played with, a doll with blonde hair, but dressed in a Japanese kimono her mother made. At Sonoma State, President Sakaki is very hands-on, greeting students, greeting faculty and staff, sampling cafeteria food, and reaching new heights on the campus climbing wall. Recently, Judy was named President of the Year by the California State Student Association, representing the 400,000 students in the state university system. Congratulations to Sonoma State's 7th President, Judy Sakaki.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the 7th president of Sonoma State University, Judy Sakaki. Woo! Next up is someone who has brought cuisine, Hawaiian cuisine, Pacific fusion cuisine all over the world. Please pay attention to the screens. Here's Chef Roy Yamaguchi.
I have brought in someone who is an absolute master in fusion. He is a James Beard Award winner, executive chef and owner of the world-famous Roy's.
Chef Roy Yamaguchi defined Hawaiian fusion cuisine. His signature restaurant, Roy's, is in 30 locations, from Hawaii to Texas to Guam. Roy is the first chef from Hawaii to have received the food industry's highest honor, the James Beard Award as Best Pacific Northwest Chef. Roy has also written 3 cookbooks.
Joining me on my show today are my good friends.
And for 6 seasons, hosted his own television show, Hawaii Cooks with Roy Yamaguchi. Roy was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan. He credits his Hawaii-born father and grandfather for giving him an appreciation for local food. He also credits this.
When I was in high school, I had taken home ec in high school, and a buddy of mine said, "Hey, Roy, if we take home ec, we can meet some girls." so I took home ec and fell in love with it, and ended up going to school in New York.
It was in New York that he studied at the Culinary Institute of America. Today, Roy and his wife, Denise Hayashi Yamaguchi, have been super supporters of the U.S.-Japan Consul. Roy serves on the Board of Consulars, and 3 years ago he chaired the Culinary Festival at the USJC conference in Hawaii. Everything was delicious, oishii, and so ono. One more thing about Roy, he had a band in high school and played the drums. He still plays the drums. Meet chef and drummer Roy Yamaguchi.
And here he is. That's right, chef and drummer Roy Yamaguchi. In my quest to find millennials to be part of my panel, I found a fabulous young woman, and you'll get to meet her on video, Sarah Miyazawa-LaFleur.
To everyone else, Sarah Miyazawa-LaFleur was a huge success. She graduated from Harvard, worked in New York and Paris for the luxury goods group of Starwood Capital. Before that, she was a management consultant for Bain & Company. But to Sarah, she was searching, even crying, she says, about what she would do with her life and career. She thought about being a doctor, a city planner, a bar owner, a bookstore owner, a private equity investor, even a refugee camp officer. Then, at 27 years young, she started her company, MM.LaFleur. It's an e-commerce business that ships a bento box of dresses, blazers, scarves, and skirts direct to the customer. Sarah grew up mostly in Japan and credits her mother for giving her a sense of fashion and style, and credits her mother for one more thing, muda ni shinai, not wasting anything, be it food or space. For this reason, MM.LaFleur produce and sell only what the customers said they want. If no one wants it, they won't make it. It's a disruptive concept in fashion. Today, MM.LaFleur is on target to make $30 million in sales. Based in New York City, Sarah has opened showrooms in San Francisco and right here in Washington, D.C. Meet a woman on a mission, Sarah Miyazawa-LaFleur.
And here she is, a woman on a mission, a young woman on a mission, Sarah Miyazawa-LaFleur. And rounding out a panel is somebody I've been stalking his career now because there are very few Japanese American men in television. So I've been stalking his career, and through friends of mine at CBS, I got to him, and here he is, Adam Yamaguchi.
I spent the last decade in every corner of the world, in over 90 countries, exploring frontiers. I've been caught in just about every type of situation. And you still have to keep a smile on your face, because as soon as that smile disappears, you might find yourself in some trouble.
Emmy Award-winning reporter Adam Yamaguchi has been just about everywhere. In the Amazon, getting personal with a leech.
Inside my pants, close to my crotch. There.
In Southeast Asia, looking for illegal meat.
I want like fresh new tiger, like freshly killed.
And in the deep underground of drugs.
This is crystal meth.
But his most recent story in Japan on one solution to help the declining population was captivating. The story was on human robots.
Wow. I can see her breathing. The goal here is to make the robots as realistic as possible.
Adam was born and raised in Los Angeles and graduated from UCLA. For all of his globe-trotting adventures, it's hard to believe that at one time, Adam was planning to be an investment banker.
Bye. Bye.
And now, please say hello to broadcast journalist Adam Yamaguchi.
And here he is, broadcast journalist from CBS, Adam Yamaguchi. All right, here we are. So first question goes to Judy. And some of us were so proud when we went to Judy's investiture in April of this year. And we were just so proud. I mean, Dane Kono was, I'm going to call out some names. Dane was there, John Okamoto, Stuart came, I mean, Diane Fukami. We were so proud because Judy became the very first Japanese-American woman to serve as president of a 4-year university. And last night her husband reminded me she's also the first Asian-American woman in California to serve as president of a 4-year university. So Judy, because you're the first, do you think the expectations for you are really strong and tough and insurmountable almost? What do you think?
Well, you know, it's such an honor. When I was appointed, I think one of the things that I first felt was not only the honor, but the opportunity to really make a difference. But with that comes this incredible responsibility. I remember my father, when I was very young, applying for positions and things, and he would say, don't do anything to embarrass the Japanese-American community. You know, no pressure there. But really thinking about that incredible responsibility to be really a role model, not only to Japanese Americans, but for women and women of color, to really say, if I could do this, you can do it too. I grew up in Oakland, as Jan mentioned in the video. I was a single mom. I raised 2 sons on my own, and then went on and got my PhD at Berkeley. So I really feel that responsibility. I also think it's important to think about how the community can support, because these positions are really tough. Getting the position is one thing, and there were never any Japanese Americans or Asian Americans on any of the boards that selected these presidents. So if you could think about serving. But also we need your support once we're there, because getting the position is the easy part. Keeping it, because these positions are so political, is the really tough part. And I really need your advice and support and connections to help in the future. And connections to make sure that we not only are seen as great managers, but as visionary leaders. And I'll talk a little bit more later about some ways we do that.
Well, thank you for being here today, because I know Sonoma State needs you too, but we need you here today. Next, we need to say congratulations to Chef Roy Yamaguchi, because he is the first James Beard Award winner in Hawaii, and this is the highest honor in the food business. So first, congratulations to Roy. And then, Roy, tell us the driving force behind Pacific fusion cuisine, Hawaiian cuisine. I mean, you developed this. You're credited for developing this. I mean, what did you think back then? Aha, I've got the secret formula to new cuisine.
Well, I figured if I did something that was mine, nobody would tell whether it's good or bad. To me, that was very important. And number 2, I thought to myself that if I can serve my personality on a plate, you know, it would be considered mine. So, you know, those were some of the things I thought about, you know, starting from taking home ec in high school. Because when I took home ec in high school, I had invited my school counselor to a luncheon. And, you know, I thought about him because he's the one who said, hey, Roy, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And I said, you know, I'm not really sure. And, you know, don't really want to think about it. But so, you know, those are the things that you know, I guess keeps me driving.
Thanks, Roy. Next up, Sarah Miyazawa-LaFleur. And, you know, Sarah, I said, reading your bio, searching for you on the internet, I mean, you seem to have it all. Education, a great job, traveling from New York to Paris, everywhere. But you say still that as a millennial, you were searching. What were you missing that you knew you had to have? Sarah.
First of all, thank you for having me here. And I hope I don't disappoint in representing the millennial generation. I find them just as mysterious sometimes. You know, I think the thing that I was missing, for the longest time throughout my childhood, I thought I wanted to go into the nonprofit world. And I went to this school called Sacred Heart, and one of the alumnas, we have some, oh yes, Sacred Heart, okay, in the house. And one of our alumni was Sadako Ogata, who is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And so she was a huge inspiration, and I thought that's what I wanted to go do. And then, long story short, I ended up having an opportunity to go work in a refugee camp and was almost surprised by how utterly powerless I was. And if anything, the time that I spent there, I learned so much more than anything I could ever give. And thus began this nebulous journey towards trying to find something that I thought I could really make, where in an area where I could really make an impact. I never thought I would go into fashion. That was very, very remote from anything I thought I wanted to do growing up, but it turns out that this is my passion and something I'm half decent at, so this is what I'm doing for now.
MM.LaFleur. All right. Adam Yamaguchi, let's be honest, and we can share this in this room. Most Japanese American parents say to their sons, please be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an engineer. I don't think any Japanese American parent would say to their son, oh, go be a broadcast journalist, go be a reporter. What did your parents say to you?
Nothing. I had an interesting childhood in the sense that I grew up in an area with lots of Japanese Americans, lots of Asian Americans, and all of my friends were under immense pressure from their parents to follow careers in finance or become doctors and lawyers. And I think that my parents just weren't paying attention to me because there was none of that pressure. And I would say that until I found myself in front of the camera, I had never realized that this was something that I wanted to do because there were no examples out there for me. And so I didn't realize that this was something that was possible. And as you mentioned in the piece, I had my sights set on becoming an investment banker because that's all I saw around me. And so I credit my parents with really not setting any limits to what I can do and just sort of letting me roam free and find that path, however serendipitously it arrived.
Yeah. And Adam, as I mentioned, has traveled to 90 countries, and we're lucky because he was almost going to have to go to Saudi Arabia today, but he's here with us. The trip got postponed slightly, so we're awfully glad that he's here. Back to Judy. We've got the good news, I think, about Japanese Americans, or certainly people in Japan. We value education, and we think that that is really one of the goals for families, for our children and their children. But to parents and grandparents in this room, to students in this room, what should they know about the future of education? Judy.
I think it continues to open doors for everyone. And I think that it is, while it's competitive to get into some universities, the future of education is bright, and that's the path. That's the path for many of us and for many low-income families and students. It's the way in which they can better themselves and give back, which is so important, to give back to our communities.
Okay. And even though we hear about the high cost of education today and what it costs, you're still saying, go get that college degree.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Of course.
All right. So, yes. To Roy. First of all, don't you like Roy's chef's outfit? Isn't that kind of cool? He told me he brought it, he describes it. I said, oh, could you go and change and wear it?
I got it for free.
Cool. Yeah. And it's got the kind of the Hawaiian Wrens, from Wrens in Hawaii. It's got the Hawaiian flavor, so thanks, Roy. So Roy, you've such a success in Hawaii, but what do you tell young chefs today? Because, millennials are all about good food. I'm looking at my two young people at the end here. Millennials are all about good food. But what do you tell young chefs today that they must do to become a success?
Well, you know what? Not sure myself, but if I knew, I would have 1,000 restaurants. But I don't know. For myself is always because there's a difference between so-called cookie cutter restaurants, and there's also restaurants like we do, which are pretty much personalized. So to me, it's important to create a brand. So from the very start, I did my own type of cooking because I wanted to do something that was mine. And I thought it would be a lot easier to brand only because it's myself doing it. But on a daily basis, I tell my guys in the kitchen, it's extremely important to continue to, work with our culture. So whatever they do is for them to, have in their mind that they have to have principles that they have to adhere to, and then those principles become their culture. And for me, a very important word in what I do on a day-to-day basis, among a lot of different things that are challenging on a day-to-day basis, is the Japanese word for hospitality, omotanashi. And that's extremely important to me because that's what we need to do. And that's what, I try to teach the individuals that work for me earlier on, so they have that in their heart, so that as they continue to work, they're working to please.
Great philosophy. To Sarah, we did mention that you're a millennial. And your success, $30 million this year for your business, MM.LaFleur, what advice did you not listen to and wish you did? So go ahead, Sarah.
Yes, great question. We're on track for $70 million this year, but I'm just going to throw that
All
in
right.
as a side note.
Woo! All right.
No, it's a good question, and I think probably the advice I wish I had taken from my mother is you should probably think about getting another job before you quit your current one, which is what happened when I left my last job in private equity, and it wasn't a fit, and so I decided to quit, and I quit cold turkey. And it was really only when my paycheck stopped arriving that I realized the implications of leaving a job without another job lined up. And I also found myself with no health insurance. And so then my now husband, then boyfriend, and I became domestic partners at some stationery store where we could find a notary. So that was my journey into entrepreneurship, and was very unsexy, contrary to, I think, a lot of what is mentioned out in society today. And I ended up realizing that at the age of 27, despite my college degree, what I was best suited for was tutoring the SATs. So that's what I spent the next 2.5 years doing, is tutoring the SATs. And that's how I tried to make ends meet. And I wish I had thought through that advice a little bit more, because I probably would have played things out a little differently.
Okay. To Adam, we saw that you've done stories in the Amazon, as I mentioned, getting personal with a leech. You've gone to look for tiger meat, and you've done drug cartels. I mean, you've done some pretty risky stories. Is there a story you will not do?
I cannot think of a story that I would not do
Really?
right now. It's a tough one. It's a really tough one.
Yeah.
I would be afraid to go to North Korea now. That is probably the one country that, if I were granted access right now, I would probably not go into.
Okay. And is there a story you would absolutely want to do? You and I talked about a story you really wanted to do and did on the Darien Gap, but is there a story coming up you really want to do?
Well, my next assignment is coming up in about a week's time, and I will be going to Myanmar and Bangladesh. As many of you are probably aware, there's a humanitarian crisis and what some call an example of ethnic cleansing, the Rohingya minority. That's been happening for some time, but has really just in the last few months really been inflamed. And the story that we're looking at, now of course this has been well documented, but the story that we're looking at doing is we want to take a sort of a different angle at the story and show the role that social media has played in fueling the ethnic tensions that the government and those who are complicit in this ethnic cleansing justify their actions by. And it's an example of a changing, tumultuous world in which the power of social media, which has done tremendous good for the world, can also do tremendous bad, especially in flailing democracies like Myanmar.
I'm going to start with that and work back, and then I'm going to open up for Q&A to the audience. So, Adam, working back through the questions, being Japanese American, and when you go to Southeast Asia, when you go to the Amazon, and when you go to the underground drug cartels, do they see you first as a Japanese American? Do they see you as a journalist? Do they see you with is there racism involved? I mean, tell us, what do you find out in the field?
It's funny, in many parts of the world, people, whenever they see me out with cameras, assume that I am some sort of martial artist / actor. And it's gotten me out of a lot of trouble. I once found myself in the Khyber Pass, which is the sort of no man's land that sits between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I was reporting really during the height of the War on Terror, when being associated with Americans, being with an American crew, could put you in harm's way. And of course, I was reporting at the time for an American company. And the folks that we were speaking to just could not equate the idea of me being an American. So they saw me, and I kept saying, no, I'm from the US, I'm from the US, until I realized, wait a minute, I can use this. I'm Japanese. And the temperature suddenly changed. And they became incredibly warm and gracious, asked me if I had a PlayStation, asked me, rattled off every Japanese brand they could, which, by the way, speaks to a lot of Japan's incredible soft power. So many people around the world still identify. There's so much love and affinity for all that Japan does commercially, and that sort of got me out of a jam.
There you go. So you use it to your advantage. All right, to Sarah, you know, we are here and we are a U.S.-Japan consul, and you were partly raised in Japan, your mother's Japanese. What influence do you think the Japanese culture, the Japanese influence have had on you in your business?
An exceptional amount. I'm actually more Japanese than American. I spent most of my childhood in Japan, and my father is American, and he actually worked for the Foreign Service, so we ended up moving around quite a bit. But even when my father was posted in places like Taipei or Malaysia, often my mother and my sister and I would choose to, or I shouldn't say choose, but that was my parents' decisions. We ended up living in Japan, so I went to a Japanese school, and you know, I actually thought I was 100% Japanese until one day I realized I wasn't. And so I would say really it's had an impact on my business in two ways. I think the first is this notion of professional women and serving the professional woman. So my fashion brand is specifically targeting professional women, professional working women. So we do a lot of skirts, button-down shirts, pants, et cetera, et cetera. I think Japan actually has a very well-developed market for the office lady, the oeru, and there are lots of great fashion brands, and when they make these clothes, the way they develop, the way they do fashion in Japan is they really have the end user in mind, and there's so much creativity in what they're doing. I mean, Uniqlo is such an obvious example about, you know, whether it's heat tech or cool tech, but when we decided to create our first button-down shirt, I asked my designer, actually, who's also Japanese, she's from Kyoto, to put in an underarm pad pit, like your underarm pit pad. I guess that's the only way I can describe it. And I was like, make it so that, you know, after you sweat a ton, because women sweat in the office, I can just snap that off and throw that in the washing machine, and I don't have to send my shirt into dry cleaning every time. And my designer was like, do you have a sweating problem? And I was like, no, but you know, you've seen these asewaki patto, that's what they call them in Japan. Very common, you'll see them in any convenience store in Japan. I don't think I've seen it once in the US. So there are small pieces of innovation like that we've definitely brought into the business. And the other thing I would just say to Chef Roy's point about omotenashi, for us, we have 10 values in our company and our employees know them in and out. One of them is kizukai. And there's actually no perfect translation for kizukai in English. The closest I've ever come to is empathy in action, the ability to think about another person's needs and then move one step ahead of them. And I think that really drives our customer service.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So 2 quick questions to Roy. First, a tough one, and then an easy. Roy, what was the biggest mistake you made in the food business and learned from it?
I never made a mistake.
Okay, next question.
Nah, just kidding. No, if I didn't make any mistakes, I would have had 1,000 restaurants. No, I make mistakes every day, so that's not a problem. I think I bat less than 100. So I'm making mistakes every day.
And this is a fun question. Diane Fukami and I were talking about it. We want to know, so you have Roy's all around the world, you're Pacific Fusion Cuisine, but if it isn't Pacific Fusion Cuisine, what does a chef like Roy Yamaguchi, what does he really like to eat? What are his favorites? 1, 2 favorites. What would you say those cuisines are?
Well, my number 1 is, of course, ramen. That's my. And when I was a kid, I used to make instant ramen 18 million different ways. I still do. So that's number 1.
And number 2?
Number 2 is always sushi.
Okay.
So I'm kind of Japanese all the way, and I just enjoy it.
Okay, so there we go. Ramen number 1, everybody. Sushi number 2. So, Judy, on a serious note, and a lot of us know, and maybe you don't know, but I'd like to share, Judy Sakaki has a home in Santa Rosa, which is in Sonoma County. And for some of us who live in California, we had horrific fires in Napa and Sonoma counties. And 5,000 structures were lost, and one of them was Judy Sakaki's home. And it was at 4 a.m. in the morning that Judy heard the fire alarms going off in her home, got up to investigate, saw that her house was on fire, went back screaming to the bedrooms, 4 a.m. in the morning, to her husband, Patrick, to get up, we got to get out of here. And they literally ran out of the house, and Judy can talk about this, and lost everything. So the question is, after you had, and it was a beautiful house, and lost everything, when it all comes down to it, what really matters? What is the one thing that matters most? But you can tell the story how you woke up at 4 a.m. in the morning first.
So one of those experiences that you never expect to ever have in your life. And when you see your house on fire, you just run. And we ran out barefoot with nothing, and we ended up with, that's what we had. I had a bathrobe. And first, I think the feeling is of appreciation and gratitude that one is alive. We were grateful to the 2 off-duty firemen who we happened to run into after we thought we couldn't make it anymore through such thick smoke, and grateful that they took the last run up our hill where our house was as we were running and almost overcome from smoke, and we were in an inferno, houses on both sides, all the trees just going up, and it felt like we were getting thrown charcoal briquettes at us as we were running. I'm grateful that those 2 men were happening to drive up and took this last run and that we are still alive. But then once you get past I don't know if you ever get past the shock of gratefulness that you're still alive, but it's really realizing what really matters, and that is, of course, family and friends, and telling those that you love them, and not taking anything really for granted. I don't know that we did before. But the thing that I miss most, and the thing that is the hardest for me, is not losing all my clothes, which that was something, and all my jewelry, the pearls we got on the trips to Japan. But it was all the things from my grandparents and my parents that were in the house, things from the internment camp, the original tags that they wore, the photographs, the kimonos from my grandmother that were in a chest, and to go back to the house and see powder and dust and know that all of that was there. So we're still healing, we're still working through it, and the treasures are still the memories, and being able to tell stories. I miss, my grandmother's cookbook or my mother's cookbook, and I'm worried about Oshogatsu coming and not having those family recipes, but you realize that love and family is what will get you through, and friends. So thank you.
So I did ask Judy, 5,000 structures. I said, where are you living? And, as president of Sonoma State University, she and her husband, Patrick, are living in the dorms.
It is really interesting that I love our students, but it's a bit much.
And Patrick was saying, well, why don't you guys get invited to other parties, right? So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. We've got 2 microphones that we'd like to bring to you because we want to hear your questions. We're going to bring the house slice up by another 20% so that we can see you. But I'd love for you to ask questions of any one of the panelists, and we'd love to have a 2-way communication with you. So, questions from the audience, and let us see, and where are my runners with the microphones? Okay, microphone here, we got a microphone here, so we'll bring the microphones to you, but if you can just stand up and offer your question, we'd love to hear from you. So, let's go. Come on, people. Please don't be shy. Come on. Oh, right here in the center. Please stand up and tell us your name. What city? Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Marina, and I'm from Connecticut. My question is for all of you. In your personal and professional lives, how do you balance your extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation? Thank you.
Okay, so did we get that question? No, we didn't get that. Say it again. Well, how do you balance what?
How do you balance your extrinsic motivation and intrinsic?
So in plain English, how do you balance your...
How do you balance your, let's say, or
quality of life with quality of life with
Are
quantity.
you chasing after money, or are you chasing after something else, like a vision or something intangible? I mean, money can
She's
be
a millennial, right?
I'm a millennial. Just
The
an
intrinsic,
ignorant
I can't even
millennial.
spell the word. How do you balance quality of life with quantity of
With
life?
quantity, basically.
That
yeah,
I get.
Thank you for simplifying.
Yeah.
Yes.
That I get. So we're going to go to the young people in our panel to answer that question. And Adam, I am going to go to you because you travel all over the world. I mean, tonight you're supposed to leave for Saudi Arabia. You are leaving for New York City tomorrow morning, bright and early, to do a meeting. How do you balance quality of life with quantity? And then, it is a crazy world, being a broadcast journalist. I get it. Family, how do you balance family life? Tell us about that.
I think by most accounts I have a terrible quality of life, in the sense that I'm constantly on the road. But I can probably count on my 2 hands the number of days that what I do has actually felt like work. I'm naturally inquisitive. I'm curious about the world. I enjoy getting out there and listening to people's stories, and so it's been great for me, and I genuinely enjoy what I do. It's not about chasing money at all. Finding what you do is probably the greatest gift that you can find. It can be tough. The Sunday night red eyes can get to you. Missing birthdays and special occasions can be tough. But everyone in my life has sort of taken to living vicariously through my adventures, and so if sharing stories is something that I can offer to the people who I know and love around me, that's fulfilling.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, to you, how do you balance quality of life with, hours? You run your own business, so how does it work for you?
Well, I would love to hear from the older generation, because my feeling is the older you get, the more quantity you want. Oh, no, absolutely not.
You older generation people are next.
I think for me, just having this moment where I was talking about earlier, where I quit my job cold turkey and then didn't have a job, was actually a moment where I realized, wow, I don't actually care about money all that much. Private equity is kind of like the most money-making industry in the world, and then I went to being completely unemployed and tutoring and random $15 per hour jobs, and it was a good lesson in there are many ways to make money, not just in an office or in a corporate setting, and that was strangely empowering to me. And so maybe it's too obvious and easy an answer, but definitely quality over quantity.
Okay. To the older generation, Roy, you go first. Yeah. So get
I
your mic.
refuse to take the mic.
So how do you, I mean, let's be honest, Roy, you do travel for business. You've got restaurants all around the world. I mean, 30 restaurants in Guam. He's got a restaurant in Guam and Texas. And so how do you balance? And, you know, we all love your wife, Denise.
Well, see, the most important thing to me is, what time is it now?
Yeah. Yes.
See, by 5 o'clock every evening, I have to have a drink in my hand.
It'll be 6 o'clock tonight, Roy.
That's how I balance my life. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I mean, I'm being serious now. No, so, yeah, well, I mean, it's, for myself is, I really enjoy what I do. What I do, I'm very, very passionate about. And it's something that I guess if I don't do it, I feel very unhappy. So, and every morning I wake up around 4:30, and I can't wait to get to work. And it's one of these things where when I'm at work, I'm probably the happiest. So it's a problem, but but hey, what the hell, right? We have to. Listen. At the end of the day, it's kind of interesting because I have two older kids. One's 31, who is finishing her residency, and she's in Oakland Children's Hospital. So, and then my younger is in LA, but my middle. But it's interesting because I didn't get a chance to really see them grow up, but they really understand that it was my passion, and then whatever I did in my past, I did it for them. So they appreciate that I was able to, put them through and give them a nice education. And so, at the end, when you're doing it, you think maybe you're doing it for yourself, and I mean, at the end of the day, it was for my family, but at the same time, there was needs that I had to fulfill. But I guess at the end, when they get older, they realize that the sacrifices that I might have, or sacrifices that they gave up, of not, seeing me, maybe, on the other hand, maybe they didn't want to see me. I'm just taking it for granted that they wanted to see me, but maybe it's the opposite. But at the end of the day, it all worked out, so, thank God, so.
Thanks, Roy. And to the next older person. And by the way, Judy is a proud grandmother. She's got 2 boys and 3 grandchildren so far. And again, being university president, how do you get to balance your quality of life with all the issues that you have to go and do?
So I think at different stages in my life, it's been a different way of balancing. When I was a single mom, it was making sure that I had enough time with my children as well as I was advancing my career and finishing my degree. And then it's also important to bring your family along with you as you're going through these changes. So I know when my parents were alive, it was interesting and important to have them understand what I was doing in my work and to include them. They didn't always understand it, and there were times when I think it was hard on my parents, or my father in particular, to think about changing jobs because he felt that I should be loyal to the one university when I was at Fresno State. And so it meant bringing him along to see what I was doing, and I will never forget the time in the football box where we were entertaining potential donors, and I introduced him to the then president, John Welty, and they very graciously bowed to him and said, "Thank you for taking care of our Judy." And I was a vice president at the time. And it kind of went over. The president then said to him, "No, actually she takes care of us." But I think it was important to include your family in the changes you're going through, and that helps in the balance in your life. Currently, as president, I don't know that there's balance. I'm grateful that my husband is very supportive. There's a lot of weekends and nights events that we entertain at, and it's carving out time to do the things you love, whether it's just sharing and talking, or we love the outdoors, going for a hike now and then. It's hard, but it's trying to balance all that and take care of not only yourself, but the things you love to do as well.
Is that good for you, Sarah, for the older generation? Is that good advice, Sarah?
I don't know who you're talking about. There's no older generation.
All right. So other questions from the audience, please. We'd love to. Millennials, this is your time. Let's see millennials. Where? Oh, right here. Okay, please, stand. Can you just stand up and start shouting, and we'll give you the mic? And tell us your name and where you're from.
Hi, Satohiro Akimoto, Washington, D.C. I have a question to Judy Sakaki. You said that getting a job is one thing and keeping a job is another. And also you said that keeping a job is very political. Do you mean it's political in general, or do you mean there are added elements as being a Japanese-American woman or minority woman?
Good question. Judy.
Question. I think it's all of those. One of the things is that when you're a university president, you have to make many decisions, and sometimes those decisions may not be popular with everyone. And they can be political in the sense is that someone who may not like a decision you make could decide to make your life very difficult, can become political in that sense to say, I don't think you're a good president. I think we'll make life a little difficult, or we'll take some donors away from you. All of these kinds of things, in that sense, yes. And there's also the stereotype, we want to say the implicit bias of being a Japanese American woman, people saying, oh, I've been asked at interviews, are you tough enough? Have you ever fired anyone? I don't think those are questions that they would ask everyone in an interview. And so you have to deal with that as you lead. We are often seen as being great managers, great number twos, right? And the question is, when we step up to be number one, are we seen as a visionary enough leader, connected enough, political enough to be able to bring the resources to bear on the jobs that we have? So yes, so it is difficult to not only get the job, but to keep the job and to be successful.
Question.
And I will rely on all of you for support and advice to make sure that as the first Japanese American woman president that I'm successful. And I'm new in my presidency, just a little over a year.
So everybody in this room, we are going to be supportive of Judy Sakaki, right? Let's hear it. Yes.
So we would welcome internships, hire our alums. If you have a company, a corporate sponsorship, we would welcome all of that.
There you go. You're in this room, so you're all committed. All right, a few other questions. Right here. Oh, Tasha. Tasha's on the board. Tasha grew up in Osaka. Can you get the mic to her, please? Tasha grew up in Osaka. She's on the board for the USJC. She's a lawyer in the Bay Area. Go, Tasha.
Tasha Yorozu from San Francisco. My question is to the millennials. In your words, what does 40 and above folks bring to you or give to you in a different way? What do you seek from those who are 40, 50, 60 years old?
Okay, thank you. Tasha, who would like to? Sarah, you're smiling away. You go first, and then it's Adam. Go.
Well, I was just listening to Judy talk, and I was thinking to myself, wow, I would love to work for her. And she presents such a sense of calm. And I think, especially in the work that I'm doing, it's startup life. You know, now we can see a quarter out, maybe sometimes even a year out, but every day felt so chaotic. And I mean, I'm sure this is true of all of us, but I was, you know, we were on every weekend, every night, and it just felt, and it still feels sometimes like complete madness. And you're trying to be a good boss at the top, and I think, you know, one of the lessons that you learned is the way to lead is not always by just telling people what to do. It's by listening and integrating these different ideas that come together to ultimately figure out what's best. And I think when I turn to my advisors or mentors, the ones I look for are the ones who present a sense of calm and this notion that this too shall pass. And I think that comes with a lot of life experience.
Okay, Adam.
I would actually echo a lot of what you said. You know, the leaders that I look up to have always been the people who can sort of bring me down a few notches and offer that sense of calm leadership. I think one of the most important things that I do is listen. A A terrible journalist is someone who goes out into the field thinking that they have the answers to the story or knows what the story is. The most important thing that I do is listen, absorb what I'm hearing, and report that. And so whether it's, you know, a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old, or a 55-year-old, there's always something that I can take in from whoever it is I'm talking to.
70-year-old. 70-year-old. So does that help, Tasha? Yeah, okay, great. And you know, that's a good question because we too want to know all about it. Couple other questions. Back, all the way in the back, go.
Thank you.
Your name and where you're from.
Well, my name is Grace. I'm originally from Michigan, but I'm shocked to realize I've been in D.C. for 8 years now. I guess that makes me a Beltway insider. But I would like to pull on the thread put forward of bringing the family along. You know, a lot of us who study Japan get excited about the notion of spending time living there, and that's a little bit harder to do once you get to the stage where you have a family. And so, considering that the panel has had so much experience living on both sides of the Pacific, I'm wondering if you have any advice for Americans trying to pursue career opportunities in Tokyo. How do you do that when you need to bring the family along?
Okay, all right. So, Roy, you grew up, you were born in Okinawa, you speak Japanese, and you know, you've got restaurants. So how would you respond to that question?
Stay silent. You know, I mean, I actually brought my kids to Japan because I wanted my kids to see where I was born. To me, it was very important that my kids were able to see and experience, you know, my childhood. So you know, bringing them to Japan and showing them to, you know, a base. I was born and raised on a base, U.S. Army base, because my father was born and raised on Maui. So going on base and, you know, well, going on the U.S. base, I mean, you need, you know, someone to escort you in. So called one of my friends and went on base. But, you know, to me, it's important that, you know, you actually spend the time and you know, to spend the money to have your kids, you know, understand why, I mean, to understand who I am and the reasons why I am the way I am, you know, because until I brought them to Japan, you know, my two kids thought I broke out of jail or something. So, it's a joke.
Okay. It's a joke.
Let's not be too serious, okay, guys?
And,
See, I'm the fun one on sitting here.
Yeah, exactly. And Judy, I mean, you got married the second time in a kimono, which I love. So your answer.
Well, I think bringing the children along meant letting your children see the different roles that you have. I'd like to go back to, I think, thinking about how I brought my parents along when my parents were Nisei and they thought I was being disloyal to go for another job. My father was quite upset when I was nominated for a position at UC Davis. In fact, he asked me, who will know that you're a finalist? And I said, well, actually, at that time, it was all public. It would be in the newspaper, it would be on the internet. And he said, well, gosh, how many other Japanese are in the final pool? And at that time, there were 4. There were 3 others. And he said, any Nihonjin? And I said, no. And he said, oh, that would be terrible if you didn't get the job. What's the likelihood that you wouldn't get that job? And I said, well, I'm 1 in 4. You know, I might not get it. And he said, oh, that would be... And so he was really upset that I would even go for the interview. So when I got the appointment as vice chancellor, I had to go back to my father, who was really upset. He didn't want to... He was so mad, he wouldn't want to speak to me. When I got the job, I went to tell him that I was offered the position. And again, he was very quiet. He didn't say much about it. And I thought, how am I going to get him to come along with me to realize that this is something that one can do and it's a benefit? And so when they were doing the announcement in the press of my appointment, and they said, well, what newspapers should we send this to? And I named many Japanese American newspapers, the Hokubei and others. And I said, they said, our team at the university said, oh, we're not sure about those newspapers. And I said, I can give you all the contacts. And they said, what shall we write? And I said, you should write the same story, but you should say Judy Sakaki, comma, daughter of Ted and Masako Sakaki of Oakland, comma, was just appointed. And then that ran, and then their friends started calling them, congratulating them, and then it changed. It changed, then it was okay. So when I say bring your family along, we have to understand there are different generations and different feelings about things, and so we have to try and remember that and include our family members as we make changes in our own careers.
So I have time for one last question from the audience. Raise your hand. Oh, way back there, yes. Microphone. Tell us your name, where you're from.
Hi, my name is Leah Camargo. I currently live in Boston, but was raised in Tokyo, Japan. My question is about diversity, and I would love to get your insight on what diversity means to you. As folks who live at this intersection and have had life experiences in both the US and Japan, I wonder how your concept or understanding of the word diversity, how has your experience as Asian American, as a Hafu and mixed person, Sarah, how has that experience defined what diversity means to you? And do you see a difference between diversity in the US and diversity in Japan?
Okay, so we'll take it from quick answers from all our panelists. Adam, you go first. Diversity.
Well, I entered a field where there really aren't very many faces like mine, and I think that, you know, when I was getting started, it was sort of seen as a limiting factor. You know, I almost sort of self-censored my desires because faces like me just didn't exist out there. And so, you know, for me, it's always just been about sort of bucking the trends and trying to blaze my own path. But I also realize that there are many others who are probably in the same situation. And so I think that it is incredibly important to have a diversity of faces, of voices, of viewpoints, really in any field.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Sarah.
Yes. Well, I am usually always the odd one out if I'm in Japan or if I'm in the US. Actually, Hawaii is the only place where I don't feel like the odd one out, and for that reason, I love being in Hawaii, along with many others, and Chef Roy's food. But I would say, as a result, I think what I got really comfortable with is being in settings where people looked very different. And I got to participate in this Japan America Student Conference, which I'm sure many of you in the room are familiar with. And I realized that was the sort of utopia that, for me, doesn't exist in the real world. And so I hold that as this place where I was incredibly comfortable, where I was, you know, in the majority, and realizing outside that it doesn't exist. But I think I find incredible solace in that, too. I think there's something so beautiful that happens when you see different faces in the room. For me, that's, and I will show you, from a business perspective, the returns on the shares of companies that have the most diverse boards are the highest. And I just always say that to my investors when we talk about the need to bring in more women onto our board, or people with different backgrounds into our company.
Okay, thank you. Roy, diversity.
Well, diversity. Well, you know, being, you know, my father's from Hawaii, mother's from Okinawa, born and raised on a U.S. Army base, living in Japan. You know, went to a DOD school, Department of Defense, so English, go off base. You know, you're in, you know, Japanese and all that stuff. So to me, I thought everybody was like myself. So, you know, diversity is, you know, within me. And so as I, you know, was building my company, I would just, you know, hire people like me. You know, people that didn't know any better. It seems to work. So, thank you.
Oh, he knows. And Judy, diversity.
Well, I think for us that we have each in our positions experienced diversity and implicit bias and racism in different ways. I think it's important for us to look out for others who are different from us as we move forward, and that's to create tables of conversation and leadership that include diversity, not only ethnic diversity, but gender as well as sexual orientation. It's important for us to open the doors and be leaders in all of those areas. And I think as a university president, I see that as more important to be a role model for our students and communities of color. So.
Okay.
Diversity.
Diversity. So last question from me is to all my panelists, is there one word or one phrase that you heard from your parents, your mother, your father, your grandparents, in Japanese, as they said it to you in Japanese, that you remember today and it carries you forward? Judy.
Let's see, my parents used to say, "Tsumoreba yama to naru." And it always stuck with me, kind of loosely translated, that even the tiniest particles of dust, when you gather them together, can create a mountain to allow others who come behind you to see farther and reach higher than they ever dreamed possible. And so that sticks with me.
Okay, thanks, Judy. Roy.
Well, I guess my dad never spoke to me, so he didn't know who he was really. But my mother used to always say "gaman," and it's really interesting because later on in life, I made a deal with a public company for some of the restaurants that I built, and the CEO of that company would always say, "How come you're so patient?" So I says, "Well, I give credit to my mother." So, gama.
There you go. All right, thank you. Sarah.
My mother's family was super stoic, so this one stuck with me. It was "Hatarakamu mono wa kube karazu," which means if you don't work, you don't eat. So there you go.
That's a good one. Okay. True, too, so true. Adam.
Mine would probably be "kangai suginai de," don't overthink it, which I've applied throughout my life. Just do whatever you want.
To my panelists, Judy Sakaki, Roy Yamaguchi, Sarah Miyazawa-LaFleur, and Adam Yamaguchi. By the way, they are not related. Adam and Roy are not related. Just want to tell you. Would you please give them a wonderful round of thank you. Mahalo. Domo arigato. Thank you for coming.